Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Richardson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives at the Nestle Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. I'm here with Jeff Craig and Rozalie Jerome, who are both with March of Remembrance. And that's nationwide, or worldwide, really, right?
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Right here.
There you go. Great. And we were going to bring the March of Remembrance to University of St. Thomas's campus, but because we had to cancel events, that is one of the events that was postponed. And what it is an event to remember the Holocaust. So Rozalie or Jeff, whoever wants to go first, can you talk a little bit about yourselves and how you're dealing with coronavirus in your different areas and in terms of your worship?
Okay, Rozalie, how about you take that one first? You've been doing this the longest, so.
But she asked in terms of my worship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like my spiritual life, how's it affecting me personally or the organization?
You personally, and then we'll move to the organization after that part.
Personally, I keep the Sabbath. On Friday nights, we light the candles.
It's
It
hard.
was hard this week.
Yeah.
I almost forgot the prayers.
Yeah, Rozalie has her daughter and her son-in-law are frontline health doctors, workers,
Mm-hmm.
and she hasn't been able to see them or her grandchildren for 3 weeks. So.
Okay, it's definitely a hard time to have someone in those industries.
It's a lot. The whole world is compounded stress. I've been working hard to. I do video work.
Mm-hmm.
For 20 years, producing a TV program focusing on healing relationships between Jews, Christians, and our God, and having rabbis and pastors, stuff that you would probably just love and which is
Love it.
And but I've kind of been focusing because of the media that we've done for all those years. It started birthing other babies. With this crossover television program, it birthed the Holocaust marches here in Texas. It birthed our garden. It birthed scholarships for you guys and other universities. So I hadn't been focusing on media except filming our marches. I have a studio here in my office. We're in our studio today, and I haven't been physically doing the camera work, the editing, and dealing with that. And so with our congregation and with the marches, we decided to bring it online in some level, and so I'm having to remember, okay, this hard drive is for that computer, and also Zoom is new. I mean, I did YouTube when it was brand new. I mean, my first YouTube site with the crossover project has over 1,500 viewers, only because it's years ago, that's how we broadcasted. So yeah, so it's affected me emotionally, of course, and because my parents were Holocaust survivors and were hiding from unjust government and a lot of government control. They were hidden by Christians who put feet to their faith in Hungary when the Nazis came at the end of the war. And so it's like passed on that stress, it seems, or something. It's in my DNA in some level, and it's been scientifically proven that the stress from Holocaust survivors has passed on to the second gens. It has mutated their stress hormones.
Wow.
And I don't all the time, but I've had a couple of anxiety attacks. Like I thought I was having a heart attack a couple of times, not recently, but past couple of years from all the stuff. But anyway, I guess rising anti-Semitism, I don't know. But this whole thing that's happening with you can't do this, you can't do that, hiding in your house, staying in your house, it has triggered in me something irrational. Like it's bringing back something in my DNA of what my family went through of hiding for a year from unjust government. And I had my friend Sherry read the scripture to me. Give me the scripture today, Proverbs 29:2. I have to remember that we have a righteous government. When the righteous thrive, people rejoice. When the wicked rule, people groan. There was a lot of groaning during the Holocaust with wicked rule. We don't have a wicked rule today. We have a government that cares about, we've got even unrighteous governments worldwide today are practicing righteousness, I hope, to help protect their people. So I have to relax and tell myself, this is not unrighteous restrictions. This is for the sake, these restrictions are for the sake. In fact, they're Torah compliant, right, Jeff? What doesn't it say? Can you explain that?
There's a principle called pukak nefesh, which is preserving life. So you should live by the Torah, not die by it. And so some of the actions and restrictions that are taking place are designed to preserve life, not to punish people or take away freedoms or limit their life expectancy.
And when President Trump said 10 can gather, that's in Judaism, that's called a minyan. You can't have a service without a minyan, without 10. And that came from the principle when Abraham was wanting to save his area, right? He said, well, if 2 righteous, if 3, okay, if 10.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where Judaism got the principle of 10. To 10 people can make a difference. And I'm going to discuss with you today of how we want to do, and I will not be silent form. We'll send it to you later to spread out to the students. If they will have 10 people that will gather together and watch our programs. That's going to come on 19th to the 23rd online watch parties. And we'll also have these rocks where people could write. We have kits we're putting together. We're getting creative. I'll get back to you on them, Brigitte. When we do our marches, because we're not doing them anymore.
We are doing them
this year. Okay. Right. We're marching on the internet like you're doing with us. And I'm thankful. Everybody in a march, and we had these all ready for you guys.
Yeah.
Here, everybody can digitally wear it now.
Yeah. Wait, hang on. I think I have mine. Let me see.
You do, because we gave it to you.
I'll be back. I know I have it.
Well, while Brigitte, you got it?
Yes, I have it.
Oh, okay. So I like whenever I speak about the Holocaust anywhere, and I would like us to dedicate, if it's okay with you, can we dedicate this particular talk to the rescuer on your badge? Sure. In honor of them and the victim.
Let's see. This side is the victim.
Motel Rose from Poland died in Auschwitz. 1864, Kolomia, Poland, and died in 1939. Does that make sense? How old he was? 40.
That's older.
That's an older person. That's a senior citizen. What does that make us think about today? That was the list of the Holocaust survivors. If you were too old, you went straight to the ovens. Right. If you were a baby, straight in. Sometimes they didn't even put them gas. They just put them straight into the ovens. They had ovens, crematoria just for babies, burning alive. So today, our world is having to decide. We don't have enough respirators. If you're 80 and above or 60 and above, you don't get one. Right. So I didn't read the other name out loud of the rescuer. So we remember this other person, Motel. We turned it again over. I didn't say his name. They didn't have his name is Motel Roth. And we remember him now, who perished in Auschwitz from Poland. And Lord, we thank you for the life that he did live. And we pray that some of his children did survive.
Amen.
In the name of the Lord. And on the other side is Ivan and Maria Bondarenko. This is Russian, right? Anastasia, Ukrainian. Ivan. And this is somebody who actually was a righteous among the nations. So if anybody's interested, they could write this name down and look up on the Yad Vashem website all about this rescuer, a person that risked their life to save Jews. And that other person on the other side, they can look up also. Sometimes there's pictures and there's stories of their names. You look it up in the site called Yad Vashem, which means it's in Israel, and you could put that down if you like, yadvashem.org. And it means a place and a name, because people, Bridget, people that died, in the camps and all, they didn't have burials, they didn't have funerals. Their names were taken from them. Mm-hmm. So the name of Yad Vashem, the most important Holocaust memorial in Israel, is called Yad Vashem, meaning a place and a name.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That's the most important thing, is that to see that person, with a place and a name. And I'm glad that you brought up, and thank you for your vulnerability. I really appreciate that, because I know it's a time of struggle for you as a family member of someone who's doing the hardest work of all right now. And Jeff and I were actually talking ahead of time about how it kind of stirs up those feelings of what it was like for some people during the Holocaust. So Jeff, will you touch on a little bit of what we talked about as well, with how people are dealing with that now in this time of pandemic?
Yeah, sure. It's the elderly people, and even without any of this going on, they struggle with loneliness. Some of them struggle with depression. Just staying connected with the community. They may not be as fluent with technology tools. They may have an iPad, but they may not know how to use it. Something like Amazon Prime, for example, is such just an incredible tool for them once they get to learn how to use it. But they've got it would remind them or bring back memories of the ghetto, for example. So just restrictions on mobility, restrictions on who you could associate with, these kinds of things. And it's something that many of them had been trying to get away from, or had got away from their entire lives in coming to the United States. And then at this late time in life, to be confronted with it almost all over again is a difficulty. And especially knowing that they're more vulnerable than when they were younger, because a lot of them, the ones that would be alive now, would have been very young during World War II. Right. Their vulnerability is even more so.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned that the Jewish community is trying to do a lot of outreach to those people to keep them connected.
I gotta say, I'm very, very, very impressed. They have chesed committees, which chesed is the Hebrew word for kindness. Mm-hmm. And they're doing an excellent job of reaching out by phone, groceries, emotional wellness. The community is really tied together tightly, and nobody's being left behind. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you had mentioned, with Passover coming up, how those adjustments are being made as well.
Yeah. So if going to the grocery store and finding kosher food can be difficult, mm-hmm. right? Especially in preparing for a Passover Seder, which is a really big deal. It's often a time of year when you're having a family that would come from out of state or maybe from another country, and that's not possible this year. In fact, there's been national rulings from rabbinical organizations that have expressly come against that kind of. They're telling people not to travel, for this reason, mm-hmm. limiting the size of seders. So some things that would normally be prohibited, like using your cell phone or a mobile device or electricity on the Sabbath, is halakhically permitted. Halakhically is that's a word for Jewish law. Mm. So things that would normally would not be permitted are being permitted, because these are very special circumstances.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say also, I'm trying to get back to where am I here? Okay. A couple of survivors just died. I'm on the Holocaust survivor and descendant emails. Mm-hmm. Just died, and they can't have funerals.
Yeah.
That's like remembrance of the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. No funerals. Mm-hmm. I remember my aunt Aggie, who's a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, with her sister. She was there. They were together, thank God, in Auschwitz, and she just my aunt wanted to just die. She just the stress of the whole thing. Why bother? Mm-hmm. And what happened is her sister Juji said, "You can't die. They won't have a proper funeral." So just the thought that we have survivors dying, and they made it, and there's not going to be a funeral.
Yeah, so actually in Judaism, it's there's burials, but not cremations typically.
Okay. So this is an important thing, that there's no option for a funeral.
Right.
And that even makes more important the March of Remembrance now, and what y'all are trying to do with that effort when people are not able to be honored in these very important ways. So Rozalie, can you share a little bit about what the march is, how you do it? And it was going to come to University of St. Thomas's campus in April. Why college campuses? Why do you go to college campuses as well?
Well, because I believe we need to have our younger people know more about the Holocaust, and they don't.
Right.
And there's important lessons from it. You don't study, you don't understand the past, you'll repeat it, right? And we don't want it repeated. And the main thing is young people like to be activists. They really do.
Yeah.
And the March of Remembrance is an activist event. You're not just sitting around listening to some people talk in your classroom or in a service, in a synagogue. It's active learning. You're praying with your feet, like in Selma, Alabama, with Rabbi Herschel, when he walked with Martin Luther King. He said, "We're praying with our feet." And in the Bible, there was a lot of walking going on, claiming territory for the kingdom.
Yeah, and Bridget, also we've got the statistics. So we know that in university campuses, they can be hotbeds for anti-Semitism, hotbeds for anti-Israel. There's, as far as the literacy, the knowledge of knowing what happened during World War II, even knowing who Adolf Hitler was, for example, not there. So these are all very important reasons why we need to be involved in university campuses.
And I don't know if it was my education or what, but to me, that's shocking. Like those statistics and what you're telling me right now, it's shocking, but it's the reality, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so we want to raise up future leaders that will not be silent in the face of any kind of injustice, not just to Jewish people. There was no such word as Holocaust until it happened. They couldn't even give it a word. I don't even think was there a word for genocide? No, I don't think that was another word too. Not in the dictionary.
Wow. And so when you do
the destruction of a nation.
Yeah, when you do the March of Remembrance, the format of it is so unique, and that's what I was so intrigued by it when we were going to do it on campus. Can you describe the format of it and why that's important?
When you say the format, like when we do the people at the service, etc.
Yeah, the people at the service, the stories that are told, the whole.
Okay, well, what we have, what's most important to remember is that the March of Remembrance, it was birthed in America. It was brought to America, but it was founded in Germany with Pastor Jobst Bittner from Tübingen, Germany. And it's a university town, by the way. It's a university where 400 years before Hitler, the Duke of that town wanted to have that university. Wanted it to be a Christian university, just like yours. But he felt that there couldn't be any Jews in the town or in the whole region to have this university. And so no Jews were allowed to go to the university or to live in the area for 400 years. That's why when you study Tübingen, Germany, this town where Pastor Jobst comes from, there weren't a lot of Jews that were killed from there. That's because there weren't a lot of Jews that would live there.
Right.
Or could. And so he found out, he was saying, there's such a beautiful town. It is. It's a river runs through it. It's gorgeous. But he said there was something about it. It was very cold, very stiff. And he's a very sensitive man. He's a theologian and a pastor of many churches all over the country, the world. And drug rehab centers, orphanages. He's very activist person and prayer man, a leader over like 10,000 prayer intercessors worldwide as well. So he's a great man of God. And his name is, again, is Pastor Jobst Bittner, Jobst Bittner, Bittner. And that's March of Life in English. How do you say it in German?
Marsch des Lebens.
Marsch des Lebens in German. And they realized, so he found out the history of their pretty little town was not so pretty. The things they did before Hitler and the things that they did during the war. And the Eisengruppen, the mass murderers who would gather Jews in ghettos, gather them and have them over ravines you've seen and shooting them, they were trained in Tübingen, Germany.
Wow.
And what happened is he found out, he noticed his church members were also extremely not able to connect to God. And so there's centuries of anti-Semitism in that town, centuries of it. Who was Jewish? Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You think he would have been happy with it? You think he really wants to hang out in that town?
Right.
You think that there was the presence of God there easy? No. He tried to evangelize, tried to do all kinds of prayer things. Nothing would happen in his church.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, why don't we find out what your family did? And so it took about a year, and they found out because Germany kept great records. They found out that 70% of his congregation were descendants of high-ranking or Eisengruppen Nazis.
Wow.
A lot of them came from Tübingen to go all over to the different European countries to do mass murder and organization against the Jews. Not just, going to war.
Right.
So what happened is he had a broken church. Could you imagine finding out that grandma, grandpa, or mom and dad, the things they did, there was what he called it a veil of silence all over Germany. Because nobody would tell really what they did during the war to their kids and their family. Oh, I worked in an office. Well, somebody did something. And so he had a broken congregation. They were weeping. They were just broken and felt betrayed that their grandma, grandpa were really monsters in the things they did.
And so he started.
So what happened is he didn't know what to do. They prayed. Oh yeah, he's a prayer person. And he prayed and he saw a map of Europe with all these tiny dots. And it was thousands of sub-camps, concentration camps. He didn't realize how many camps there were. And, we always hear of the major death extermination camps, but there were so many slave labor camps, brothels, for this, they didn't want like the Jews, but they would use them for prostitutes, the young, fresh ones. Like when I interviewed my Aunt Aggie on one of my programs, the first thing she said to me was, don't ask too many questions. And then she said, when I got to a point when she went to Ravensburg, she said they were animals. That's all she said to me. So, in any case, where was I? I got a little note here that there's less than 20 minutes left. I don't want to take away from what we were just saying, but
I can jump in. So going back to your question, Bridget, what's different about the March of Remembrance, and it's not only that there's representation from I would say the Axis powers. So this year we were going to have the state of Germany, Japan, the state of Israel was going to be represented, other countries, France, etc. We have Holocaust survivor testimony, but also testimony from descendants of Nazi perpetrators. So people from this town and these areas that Rozalie's talking about. So that really gives another perspective or angle on this whole situation, and it makes the dynamic of the event, from my perspective, a lot more rich and powerful. So.
And at the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture, what we do is we facilitate dialogue. So bringing those two groups together to share their story, and those descendants who like you were saying, Rozalie, have uncovered this history of their family that is dark, to say the least. For them to share their perspective is so impactful for changing hearts and minds and making people aware.
Yes, this is the silver bullet we talk about, of an event, is that moment in time when a Holocaust survivor or a descendant tells their story and their pain, and you have a Nazi descendant there sharing how sorry they are that they have family that has done such things. And as a representative of, when I first experienced that, when I went to a march in Germany, it was very healing for me. I was very affected. There's something supernatural that happens in the atmosphere when you have a former enemies, like, could you imagine? I think you're black, right? I mean, you're brown. They say black, but you know what I mean. And so you're black. So can you imagine if God forbid, one of my family members was KKK?
Right.
I just found out, and I love everybody. My best friends are, all different colors, whatever. And I find this out, and I came to you, and I said, I'm so sorry for the prejudice in my family, or the things they did.
Yeah.
And the
so
things that they,
How do
and
you
I just
think
want
this is a healing experience for those people, both the descendants, because the Nazi descendants have a lot to unpack, and those people whose parents were in the Holocaust? How do you see it as a healing experience for them, but also for people who are just watching this whole thing that weren't directly involved, that didn't have family there? That's most of the college students who would be attending, right? And Jeff,
what I want to say to that, Jeff, is it okay if I answer that, or did you want to?
Go ahead.
There's a supernatural atmosphere in the room when you have this level of breaking the veil of silence, okay? Apologizing for not only your family's prejudice, but also your own little prejudice. When you didn't open up your mouth at the dinner table when you were a teenager and they were calling black people terrible names or Jews terrible names or whatever, and we were silent, okay? So you confess when there's a location and people are confessing not just their family sin, the terrible things the family did, but they're also confessing the sin of silence. The family might have been perpetrators, but we were silent when they said it at the table or at the store or in our classroom, or my girlfriend said it and I didn't say it. That's not right. You shouldn't say that.
Right.
And when we confess our sins one to another, He forgives us, right? He inhabits the atmosphere. There's a broken spirit and a contrite heart He will not despise. This is what allows rivers of living water, not stale, in a spiritual atmosphere. It's rivers of living water start flowing in the atmosphere, and people's lives get touched. And they start looking in the mirror, and they say, I've been prejudiced about Jews. I don't know why. I need to ask God to forgive me and find a Jewish person and say I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's one thing that we confront also is Christian anti-Semitism. During World War II, Germany at the time was the largest Protestant nation, right? And so there was, how did this happen? So moving people from a position of being bystanders to rescuers, that's critical. And getting the story and the history and transferring that to the younger generation.
And I like how you put that from bystander to rescuer, because Rozalie, you've been touching on it. There's so many issues of racism in our world and of just, ethnic bashing, for lack of a better way to put it.
What are people doing with Chinese people right now?
Right.
That's terrible.
It's crazy. So how, in terms of the March of Remembrance, how can we go from that bystander to rescuer through this? Like you mentioned some online ways that March of Remembrance might be happening.
Well, yeah, we are going to have a 1-hour program on April 19th to 23rd. We will send you the link, Bridget, okay? And then you will please send that out to everybody. And also, we want them to have watch parties with it and really get it out there. That's how they could be an upstander. They're going to do something. Right. Get off their little tuchus, go to their little computer and say, watch this with me. And tomorrow there's going to be another group of survivors speaking and Nazi descendants. We're going to have survivors and Nazi descendants, consuls, everything that we were going to have at your event. Mm-hmm. We're going to have more, actually.
That's awesome.
Because we have a whole hour, and we're going to have different people each time. And Pastor Yopes is going to be on there speaking. Mm-hmm. His people, they have an amazing drama team, an amazing worship team and dance team. We're going to have all kinds of, they use the arts to express. Could you imagine a bunch of Nazi descendants dressed in Jewish garb doing Jewish dance?
Wow.
It's a real paradigm shift.
Right.
And I would like to bring Chris on for a minute, if you don't mind, Christine Igi, because she's been organizing the scholarships.
Oh, great.
And I want you, and there are, if you could let them know, Chris, how people watching can, from the University of St. Thomas, the different universities that have these scholarships, that if they watch this program and share it with 5 or more people, they can contend to win the scholarship. I'm going to ask Chris to share that with you for a moment. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my big concerns when we saw that the event would have to be postponed is what about our students? And we've worked very hard, as you know yourself, Bridget, working with Dr. Bornigia, working with Meredith over in the endowment and scholarship section, trying to get everything nailed down to host the scholarship funds to go to 2 students at multiple universities in our community. And that's important to a friend of ours whose parents were Holocaust survivors. So it's part of his family legacy. Mm-hmm. So I was very concerned about this, almost more so than about the march itself, because I knew we would find a way with the march. Mm-hmm. But thanks to Rozalie's idea, she had this great brainstorm the first day we discussed it when we saw we had to postpone the marches, about having a video type program. We can actually allow more students to connect than ever before through the online platform. And that will also fuel, hopefully moving forward, when we do get the march rescheduled at the University of St. Thomas, that will fuel the enthusiasm for having an attendance at the live event for the students to participate, because each march is different. Over all the years I've been involved, it's many years now, 8 or 9, every single march is different. And one year we had 7 marches in the Houston metro area. And I attended personally about 3 of them, and my heart was gripped each time. So these students can log in, and we have a system where they can log in and let their presence be known. And there are 5 people, their friends and family members, who attend a watch party can log in under the name of the student that they're a team with whom they're a team. Uh-huh. And that way we have a record that they attended, which is part of the requirement to contend for the scholarship. And then they write a 2 to 4 page response paper addressing specific questions. 1, what element of the march impacted you most profoundly? Mm-hmm. And number 2, how does that impact inform your behavior moving forward? We want to know how they were impacted, how their hearts were sensitized. Some of these issues, even as an older person growing up with the children of Holocaust survivors on the East Coast, there are things I have learned from these marches that I never knew before. Mm-hmm. The dynamic is very full of life, full of hope, and it brings reconciliation. I can't describe how wonderful the events are. So we encourage the students to get on the watch parties.
Yes,
yeah, excited to get that link.
Yeah, I just realized the link will also be on our YouTube channel. We don't have the HRA one yet, but we have one that's called, if you could write this down, it's March of Remembrance, Texas.
Oh, okay. I feel like
I gave you the wrong link.
Okay.
I was
It's
also
March
gonna,
of Remembrance, Texas, and it'll show a lot of our past marches, Bridget,
Mhm.
and testimonies of survivors and everything. But we are going to have a live event, and we hope that we'll be able to work it out. This is new for me, as we saw how long it took for me to get on the Zoom call, to have a Q&A for people, or like when after they see a reconciliatory experience, we could stop it and say, how are you guys feeling out there?
Right.
Anybody have anything they want to confess, their
Right.
own guilt of being silent in the face of social injustice? When I remember going to Mitch and my husband and I do bike riding, and we had lunch or something with everybody at some school. So we're all sitting in a junior high school or whatever, and it didn't say stop bullying. I was fascinated. It said, do something if you see a bully.
Mm-hmm.
All the posters were not to say stop bullying, because there's not a lot of bullies. It's the bunch of bystanders in the schools and all that do nothing when some kid's getting beaten up or slammed upon.
Right.
This is what we're talking about.
Right. And
Yeah.
Jeff, you had something to add?
Yeah, there's also, Bridget, you were talking about for students, right? I remember when I was younger, maybe actually I was a university student, I was able to go to an event with President George Bush Sr. and Mikhail Gorbachev, which was incredible, right?
Yeah.
To see these two guys at the same time. You can't do that now. That opportunity doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly with our events, and I've noticed this over the past 10 years, is the Holocaust survivor community is getting smaller, every year. And so there's a sense of urgency. In the Houston area, there's probably less than 200 survivors that are living in the city today. And a very small percentage of those are actually able to come to an event like this and speak.
Wow. Okay.
So it's really, there's a window of time that we have to take advantage of.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to share the link with everyone. And thank you both, Rozalie, Christine, Jeff, all of you for coming on and talking with me about some really important issues that our world is facing right now, and that act of remembrance and how impactful it can be to take us from bystanders to rescuers, so that we can speak and make our voices be heard. So I can't wait for the link. We'll make sure to post it with our video. But again, thank you so much for joining me. And any last comments or anything like that?
I do. I just can't get back to the meeting. How did that happen? What did I do wrong?
I'll add one more thing, Bridget, and that is there's modern anti-Semitism. So we're not just talking about anti-Semitism that was taking place in World War II. There's actually anti-Semitism that's taking place today. It's taking place in our churches. We're actually seeing it with this coronavirus outbreak. Where there's people that are actually saying that this is happening to Jewish people for a certain reason, or they're responsible, or these kinds of things. So this is anti-Semitism that we're seeing live and in action that we have to confront. So
thank you.
Also, I wanted to mention that actually, I don't know if was it mentioned that this coronavirus, that anti-Semitism is considered a virus, because it morphs every generation. Whatever is hated during that century, the Jews did it. It's the Jew. It morphs. And I wanted to say that Houston Community College, Houston Baptist University, Emory Weiner School, which is a Jewish high school, Lone Star College, University of Houston, I said, right? And University of St. Thomas. So all of those have scholarships, and they need to be watched. They had to be in a march. So they will have to be in the march, on the online. And I wanted to let you know that there are going to be 5 topics for each, a different topic for each one. And the name of the program will be called Hope in Hazardous Times.
Okay.
Hope in Hazardous Times. And each day it'll be a different topic, which will be
Key to the survivor that's speaking that day.
Like hope in the face of financial loss. And we'll have a survivor that lost everything financially. So we were asking, what came to me the other day was in my spirit. I was, when all this virus started, and I'm sitting in my prayer room in my home, and it's like survivors have, they might be traumatized, but they also have something to teach us.
Definitely. Jeff and I were talking about that before. Before then.
And
yeah.
they have something to teach us. And so the main reason I really, yes, to help the scholarship students, but I wanted the survivors to give them a platform to give all of us hope.
Right.
There is hope in the midst of terrible darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the topics are
hope in the face of abandonment, because many survivors were abandoned,
right,
even by their own parents.
Parents had to give them away so they could be saved.
Hope in the face of medical crises. That's obvious.
Many survivors died from malaria, of course, starvation, etc.
Hope after humiliation. Many were brutally humiliated, cruelly humiliated, had to undress, had to perform things that they didn't want to do. They were mocked and beaten.
And humiliation. I just had a friend of mine come to my house, and she said that she was a little too, the cashier felt she was a little too close to her when she was paying, and started screaming her head off at her at the grocery store. Get away, you're too close. It's very embarrassing, very humiliating. Chinese people right now in our country, there's that issue.
Then hope despite financial peril. We're in financial peril now, many people. And then hope despite total loss. Wow. And we have a Holocaust survivor speaking. His story will be talking about how his parents disappeared. And he didn't know for many, many years what even happened to them. And he was put in a children's camp.
Wow.
Mercifully, he was rescued. So that's the takeaway for this. The silver bullet Rosalie's talking about. And reconciliation, rescue, really.
Yeah, and also they're going to share, these survivors, the interviews we're doing with them are going to share how successful they became in life, even with all the garbage.
Right. Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to to be a part of this, and I hope we can impart that upon our students and also our friends of the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture. So Jeff, Christine, Rozalie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And anytime you want to dialogue again, let's do it.
Oh yeah,
Feel
free, Bridget. I love your spirit.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks. All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
God bless you.
Bye.
Tikkun olam.